Hey, what's going on? This is Rodney Melissa Evolving. I'm Rodney.
I'm Melissa.
So we have Lillo in the house with us today.
Yeah.
He's an actor, a movie star. We can see him in Bronx Tale, Crimson Times, and
Renaissance Man.
yes.
Yeah.
And in your states. What's going on, man? Thanks for being here with us.
Yeah. You were born in Colombia, but raised by Italian parents. When did you find out you were adopted?
I always knew that I was adopted, but I didn't know what it quite meant. Like I grew up with Italian parents, old school Italian. And I remember one day I got in trouble. My dad gave me a beating. And I remember my mom came into my room afterward. And I by no means want to say my dad was abusive. He wasn't at all. That's just the way things were done back in the day. But yeah, so my mom came in my room, and I remember, she felt bad that I got hit or whatever. And she said something. She said, we're not your real parents. And I was going to Catholic school at the time. And, they teach you that Mary and Joseph are your parents. And, like all this stuff that I no longer believe, by the way. I no longer believe all of, the Catholic faith. I've come to, realize different things in my life. But this was back in the 80s. And I said, no, I know Mary and Joseph. My mom said, no. And then she told me, well, you were adopted and what that means. And then it was like, whoa. And then my whole life changed.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So have you ever been back to Colombia?
No, I've never been back there.
All right. Were you ever interested in meeting your birth parents?
I had such great parents and such great family and such a great upbringing that it was never for reasons of maybe wanting something more. It was more maybe just to see the temperament and just to really see if anything, if there was if they genetically, got sick in some way, or, cancer, was, hereditary in my genes or whatever it may be. That kind of stuff I did want to know, because sometimes just making little decisions can save your life. So if you're more, and more well-informed, I think it's, you can make a better decision. That's really the only reason why I would have wanted to meet my biological parents.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I mean, this day and age, we know so much more about our health and our genetics and stuff, and we know how that affects us. So that makes a lot of sense.
So how was growing up in the 80s?
Growing up in the 80s was great, But real quick, back to what we were just talking about. And another reason why I never really pressed to go meet them is my parents that raised me. Like I said, my dad passed away, but I have him. So, they were very good. My mom's still alive. They're very good people. So I never wanted to hurt them by going to, they always said, would you like to go find out who your parents were and this and that? And I always said no. They asked, but I know it would hurt them if I ever would have took them up on that opportunity and I would have went down there, because I know they would have thought what, did we not give them enough? But back to what he asked about, growing up in the 80s was great. I mean, obviously back then I didn't have anything to compare it to. We just lived it and it was great and we had a good time. But now the 90s were good too for kids. The 90s were, but now it's like, I see my nephew and all these kids, they don't even go outside anymore. It's like back in the day, you couldn't get us inside. Now you can't get them outside. Now they don't want to go outside. My nephew, he's got his room. It looks like NASA. He's got lights and all computers and he's got flat screens. He doesn't leave that room. And he's got 90 things going on. He's chatting to one guy on one screen. He looks like it's like a big gambling operation. Like he's got all the screens. It's crazy. So he doesn't leave. He doesn't really want to leave. And I told him, I said, listen, you can have plenty of time to sit in a room and do that kind of stuff. You don't know. Since you like this, maybe you get into IT or something, whatever it may be. You have your whole life to be able to do this and sit behind a computer screen. But you got to go out there and do what is age appropriate now, because you may not be able to do it later. You know what I mean? I work out and stuff, so thank God I'm almost 50. But, I can go out there, I can play. But, as time goes on, the harder all that becomes. And, the desire to do so becomes less and less. So go do it. Go get hurt. Like these kids, like they need to get hurt. They need to fall and scrape their knee. It's like everything, they're protected from everything nowadays. I'm not saying that, obviously we live and we learn. And, over time we saw that certain things may affect the child in a negative way and stuff like that. But I think some things children need to go through because like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's about resilience and, only certain things are going to build that resilience, so you got to really go out there. Growing up in the 80s was great. I grew up on a street called Mansion Avenue. It was a dead end and we were just such a close block and we had so much fun. Every house there were kids right around my age. So we were playing like there was every season we were playing something. We had the best 4th of Julys. It was great.
That's awesome.
That's how it's supposed to be. That's life.
Yeah. I love hearing about that. So what was it like growing up in an Italian household in New York?
You grow up with Italians and, Italians are very ethnocentric. They a lot of times think the world revolves around them, revolves around Italians. And a lot of things that I was raised to think and certain beliefs I came to find out later on are not true. I think that Italians are very set in their own ways with many things. And I don't know if a lot of the things that they are set in their ways about, I any longer agree with. I'm not going to get into what it is. There's the positive and the negative, but the food was great. We always had great parties and everyone, it was all about family. So it was like with Italians, right? If your kid is a drug addict, they're not gonna try to help you. Not to say my parents, but Italians, what they would do instinctually and just culturally what they would do, because that kid would be perceived as an embarrassment in front of the rest of the family, where they're not going to help them. Where I've seen other cultures and other religions actually come together. It's inevitable. It's inevitable that maybe 1 out of 3 people in every culture and whatever it may be is going to become an addict of some sort. And I just think the way Italians handle that, or if I just think that was a big negative aspect in their culture. I just think just Italians and whoever's like you got to be open-minded. It's inevitable. Nobody chooses to be that way. But then when it happens, and you have to support, because support is the biggest reason why I was able to get out of that. My cousin Mario and I, we talk about it all the time because he's sober as well. And that's because we got great parents and great support. You know what I mean? And if you don't have that family support, it's very hard to make it. And I just think growing up Italian with certain things, they were very closed-minded. And they are, as a culture, not every single one, but enough of them to say. And I just think it hurts them overall. If your child is a drug addict or if your child is gay, you got to accept it. That's the world we live in today. And, you can't hide the kid or, it's like you're all they have. If you don't support them, who's going to support them? Right? So that's the only thing. But, like I said, I've had very loving family. They supported me, which was why I was able to, get out of a very dark place. But I think overall, the Italian, I went to Italy. I think it's a beautiful country. I think it has many, many beautiful things about it. But the fact that I did struggle with drugs and, and it's just that, where I think, not my mom and dad, but just some relatives and stuff like that, they kind of look at you and laugh and which is not the way it's supposed to be. It's not the way it's supposed to be. It should be like, hey man, are you okay? Why are you doing this? No one chooses to become that, and no one does that for no reason. When someone is acting out that way and self-destructing, that is because there's something wrong. So whatever they're self-medicating with, that's the solution. The problem is whatever they're suffering from. Whatever kind of trauma that they're enduring at that time is the reason why they chose to act that way. Now, if you have the right support where someone can, someone actually knows why people do this and why people go, self-destruct, it's because there's something wrong. Normal, well-adjusted people don't just do that. You're not going to get a guy who's on top of the world. He's well-adjusted. Hey, let me go smoke crack tonight just for the hell of it. It's going to be you got to be hurting. You got to be in a very dark place to be able to say, this is my solution right now. This is my only solution, which I thought at one time it was. But then as time goes on, you realize that, there are many different other things and different things that I can use that are much healthier to cope with when I feel like that. Like working out. It's like, I worked out, saved my life working out.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
All right, so now let's talk about Bronx Tale. So when you were growing up, did anybody tell you you look like Robert De Niro?
I worked at a florist when I was like 13, 14 years old. And I remember I was putting out the Christmas wreaths, and I had an Atlanta Braves hat, and I'm putting this stuff down. A guy asked me a question, and I said, huh? And he said, hey, man, anyone ever tell you look like Robert De Niro? And that was the first time I ever heard that. It was at Johnny's Florist in Yonkers, working around Christmas time, and I was doing the Christmas wreaths, putting them out for display. And once he said that, like I had heard the name, but I wasn't quite sure if I knew who he was. So I remember asking my dad, who's Robert De Niro? My dad had some cassette, VHS tapes, because my dad was an immigrant. Oh, this is a Robert De Niro. My father said in Sicilian, he said in Sicilian, "I sapi giocare tutti parte." He knows how to play every part. That's what he said about Robert De Niro. I sapi giocare tutti parte. He knows how to play everything, this guy. And I was like, okay. So I started watching, like I watched Raging Bull, and I could see how people could say that there is a resemblance. Like, okay, wow. And I never quite saw acting like that. I don't know if I paid attention to it as closely, but I never quite saw acting like that or a screen presence quite like that. Like when I saw Robert De Niro, I was like, wow, man, I was just in love with the whole thing. With his ability and the screen presence and just what the emotion that he evoked in me watching film that he was in. So now I'm like, wow, this guy's unbelievable. So then I would put an orange peel in my mouth. I would try to be Jake LaMotta. I'd get my brother in the mix, have him Joey. I grew my hair like Cape Fear. And I was like really, really into his movies and stuff. And then they found me on the beach for the Bronx Tale. So it couldn't have been like, it was like a perfect thing. It's like all that stuff that I just told you I did, with stuff with my brother. It was almost like, and this was unbeknownst to me that I'd see this guy on the beach one day and get this opportunity, but it was almost like I was practicing and rehearsing and practicing for that day, because when that day came, I was ready. It's like, Robert De Niro, are you kidding me? I was just doing impersonations of him in my bathroom last week. Of course, Robert De Niro. And then that was it. I did Taxi Driver, and it worked. It worked. The guys, saw the resemblance. Marco Greco was his name. He loved it. Went into audition, got with him in the Bronx, and then he was like the gatekeeper, and then whoever did well went to the next level. So then I went to Tribeca, and I was going there, like called back every day, and there was less and less kids, and then I finally met De Niro. I worked with him. Eventually they put me on film, screen test, and I got the part, I got the part, and then, obviously went on to do other things.
So when you finally met De Niro in person, were you starstruck? Because I'm a little starstruck right now, so I'm just saying.
Yeah, I was because it kind of caught me off guard. Because I already saw Chaz, like you'd see him in the building when we were waiting on the sofas in the waiting rooms. Chaz would come down and say hello to everyone, stuff like that. De Niro didn't really do that. Not to say it's a bad thing. I guess he just, you know what I mean? I don't think, he's not the type of guy that wouldn't come out there because he thinks he's too good. He wouldn't come out there because he figures, I want these guys to be the best they can be. And if I come out there right now, I may distract that. And then they may have been great, but then when they got in the room after that distraction, they may not be so great. So I'm not seeing who and what they really can bring to this. So he stayed away, and then everyone was introduced up to that point on a first name basis. And then they said we're going to go upstairs and meet Bob. And he was sitting with his back to me, and I was back there that way. And Robin Chambers said, Bob, Lillo is here to see you. So then he did the turnaround, and that's when I saw him. I don't know if you remember a film called Mad Dog and Glory. Yeah. He looked like he did in that film because he had just finished. So he had that like blondish, that weirdish color, brown blonde. But that's what it was. He did Mad Dog and Glory, and that's when I met him. And he got up, and not a man of many words, and he's kind of a shy, introverted guy, but a very, very, very good guy. A good guy, a good loving guy. Includes. He's got empathy. He's like you know what I mean? You could see like once you break past that first, you know what I mean? That first layer of whatever, you know what I mean? Then he gets to know you a little bit. You could see what a sweet, beautiful, like a gentle, good man that he is, you know?
So do you have any story that stuck with you from that movie?
There's so many. There's so many. I mean, I've said this before, but I remember when we were doing the funeral scene, Chaz was in there all day. He fell asleep, and he started snoring. And De Niro was really trying to maintain his composure, but and he did for a little bit. But I remember he just couldn't take it anymore, and we all started laughing. It was pretty, it's funny. But there's so many. I mean, there's so many. That was an experience. That was an experience of a lifetime. It's like something like that. I mean, I don't think I'll ever experience again. Even if I work in film and stuff like that, that was just such a special situation. De Niro was in the film, but he's also the director, and he's overseeing everything and what wardrobe, people need to wear. It was a very special experience.
So are you keeping up with any cast member like Miss Hicks or anything like that?
Ralph Hicks is one of my best friends. I'm very close to her. I got to say, I'm closer to her than probably anybody else in the film. I had a podcast myself. I had Dominic Lombardozzi on the show, who played Nicky Zero. He's a great guy. Louis Veneria, Crazy Mario. I actually talked to him a couple of weeks ago. He's a great guy. The other guys, I really don't see them that much. A lot of guys passed away, a lot from Sonny's crew and stuff. Remember, that's 30 years ago, that film. 30 years ago. So a lot of guys did, like JoJo the Whale, he passed away. Danny K.O., he passed away. Frankie Coffee Cake, he passed away. So a lot of people are, but I try to keep up with, as many people as possible from that film,
Tell me this. So you grew up in an Italian household. That movie is about an Italian family. So is it pretty accurate? Was it a pretty accurate display of an Italian household?
Well, they were more Italian American. We were my parents were Italian immigrants, so it was a little different. But yeah, it definitely. I think it definitely captured what it was supposed to capture. I think it was very authentic. I mean, look what he did. He went and got unknown actors just for the authenticity. Kathy Narducci played his wife. She's from, a country club in the Bronx. So that's the Bronx. You can't get more Bronx than that. Francis Capra, who played the young me. He's from Pelham Bay Park in the Bronx. All the other kids from Arthur Avenue. Dominic, Luigi. Louis is from Pelham Bay. So I think the film is very authentic.
That's the one thing I really enjoyed about the film. I thought, it was just a normal family,
it looks
Italian
authentic.
family. Yeah, it does. It does. It just looks like you're glimpsing into someone's life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that the movie is beautiful. I mean, I don't really think they could have done anything different.
Dope movie, man. I love that movie.
Yeah. So what did you do with your first, we read somewhere your first payout was like $25,000 for that movie. What did you do with your first payout?
Oh, I don't even know. My parents, no, but I'm saying my parents put it in the bank for me. I I don't even know. So I didn't like. I didn't go buy that one thing. You know what I mean? Even though I was 16, like I didn't go buy a car with it. You know, whatever it was. But yeah, it was just put in the bank and used later on for whatever.
So that was your first movie. Then your second movie was with Danny DeVito, Renaissance Man. How was that role come about?
Well, that came about because I had an agent. Got me an audition, and then I met Penny Marshall, who was friends with Robert De Niro. They did Awakenings. So Robert De Niro showed her A Bronx Tale before it came out. Because, you know, you got to understand, Renaissance Man was a Touchstone Pictures, big studio film. So, you know, for a studio, this is like, you know, back then, $30, $40 million budget. It's like, you know, an $80, $90 million budget now or more. So, you know, for a studio to you know, take a risk on someone that's really been virtually unknown, that's a big risk. So the Bronx Tale, they already did it. And then Penny Marshall asked to see the film, and Bob showed it to her. And she loved it and said, okay. And then they hired me on that.
Okay.
So how was that movie? How was acting in that movie?
Oh, that was great. That was my first time in Los Angeles. A little bit of a culture shock when I first went out there. You know, people are different out there. They're not as outgoing as New York people. It was just different. But not to say that's a bad thing. It's just a different thing than what I had been used to at that time.
So there was a scene, you in the rain reciting that Shakespeare thing. How long did it take you to learn that?
It took me months. Well, not even so much months to learn the dialogue. It was more about learning like Shakespeare and how to talk Shakespearean. That's the part. But you know, talk Shakespearean, but also stay true to the character. So there's a lot, and then you got, you know, we did it in the rain. So that was that really took me to another level. Being able for myself, that kind of challenge, because it definitely took me out of my comfort zone. And that, you know, that's the kind of stuff that we need to take us to that next level for us to grow. I remember that. I remember after, you know, doing that scene, then we went back to, obviously I was still shooting the film, but after shooting that scene, because there was so much demanded of me, all this dialogue, to say it like it's in Shakespeare, but to stay true to Donnie Benitez. You got the rain, you're feeling wet, it's cold. There's a lot going on. And I just pushed through. And, you know, I was on go. A lot of it was on adrenaline because you're just doing it time after time, and all the, you know, the fake rain, and it was a lot. But I remember after we did that, and then we went back to just shooting normal scenes, and my acting went to that next level because I gained so much more confidence. Like, because everyone, especially Penny, she expressed to me she was very happy with what I did, and she said, you couldn't have been better. You know, you should be proud of yourself. It was great. So now I'm thinking, like, it worked, what I did. And I was working with a Shakespeare coach for, you know, a while. And his name was Harold. And working with him. And it's like all that time and all that effort and all that energy that him and I put into me learning these lines and doing, it worked. So I felt a very big sense of accomplishment at that point. Like, wow, I am pretty capable. And I was 17 years old. So at 17 years old, to have that kind of sense of accomplishment and that intrinsic, you know, that motivation, it just elevated me to that next level. Just how when people say you got to step out of your comfort zone, that right there, I saw it happen because I wasn't as nervous on the set after that. You know what I mean? When that camera's on you, even though you got 7 million movies, you still get a little bit nervous. So there's a little, but I just felt like a lot of it was like, just lifted off.
Wow.
So I made it.
Yeah.
I came
yeah.
through. You know what I mean?
I get nervous when the camera's on us now, so I can only imagine what it's like there.
I was nervous to come talk to you, man.
So yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So, okay, tell me, is Danny DeVito as funny as we think he is?
Oh yeah, he's great. He's a great guy. He's hilarious. Danny DeVito and I. He's not Italian. His last name is DeVito, but he's of Albanian ethnicity. He's an ethnic Albanian, and they're in Italy, a lot of them, and they're known as Abaresh or Gegge. He's gay. And I remember when I first met him, we were sitting down, and he's smaller than he's smaller than you're thinking he is. He's this little guy. So I remember I go in the room. It was not even a Renaissance Man. It was some other thing. It was called Jersey. That's the name of his production company. It was about a family on the Jersey Shore. Nick Turturro was there, a couple other guys, and we got the callbacks, and then we made the reading. But I remember I had to sit in the room. Everyone had to sit in the room with Danny DeVito. And I remember sitting in that room. I remember him saying to me, he goes, "Yeah, Lillo Brancato." He goes, "Yeah, nice Irish name, right?" So making a joke, right? I said, "Yeah." I said, "You're Italian too." He goes, "Actually, I'm not Italian." He says, "Actually, he goes, I'm gay." And I was like, "I know what that is." I said, "That's the Albanians in Italy." He goes, "Oh my God." He goes, "No one ever knew that." So we had we had an interesting conversation just on that. And I said, my mom's from Cosenza, the province of Cosenza, a little town called Acri, and there are gay. Like, we have family members that are married to gay. Like, I know this lady, Carmelina. She's married to this guy, Antonio. They're all from my mom. They live like not far from here. Carmelina, I always thought she was Italian all these years. She's not. She's gay. She's Albanian. And that's what he is. So he was like very intrigued that I knew that. And I know for a fact that definitely got me to that read-through.
I bet, yeah.
Your whole
Impressive.
background is keep pushing you forward.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
that's pretty cool.
So now you had 2 movies under your belt. Your 3rd movie is with Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington in Crimson Tide. Like, how you keep getting all these big movies on your early stage of acting?
Well, you got to strike the iron when it's hot. I didn't know that. And, I had great momentum going. I had great representation. I was represented by William Morris. My agent's name is Frank, Frattaroli. And then that was in New York. And then I had a guy, Geyer Kaczynski, in LA. He was representing George Clooney. At the same time, he was representing me. So I had top representation, and I have only myself to blame for squandering all that. Because, as you just said, how the hell do you get these 3 top-tier films under your belt so fast, right? There's actors that work a whole lifetime and don't get opportunities like that. And now here, this is coming to me without me really, I didn't really look for it. Not that I was opposed to it, obviously, because as soon as Bronx Tale, I was in there, and I wanted to, still want to do it for the rest of my life. But back then, I didn't. So the lack of appreciation is what was really my demise. You know what I mean? I didn't appreciate anything, and it just kept happening so fast that it was almost like I was entitled to have these things happen to me. And for that reason, and the fact that it's happened so fast, so soon, means that it's going to be here forever. So this movie that they're offering me, this big studio movie, I'm not going to take it because I want to hang out with my friends in the summer. It was crazy. It's crazy to think like that. Absolutely crazy. But you live and you learn. And maybe, we're never, I listened to this rabbi on Instagram. This guy's like a genius. But like sometimes we think things are not happening or our lives are in chaos. And what he said is, there's never chaos and things are never falling apart. They're always happening exactly the way they need to be happening for whatever reason. So now I look back and reflect and back in hindsight and say, maybe that's the way, our creator wanted that for me. Maybe he wanted it for me that way because then he knew that it would lead to destruction, but then the rise once again, like everything. Have you ever heard of the Chinese farmer? The Chinese farmer, it's basically life. You never know what's going to come from a good fortune or from a misfortune. You have this Chinese farmer, right? He's on his farm and he's got all these horses, right? So now one of his horses runs away. One of his best horses runs away. So all the neighbors gather around and say, "Well, isn't that awful?" And he says, "Maybe." The next day, that horse that left comes back, and he brings 3 other valuable, great horses with him. So now all the neighbors once again gather around and say, well, isn't that great? Maybe. Next day, his son, trying to tame one of the wild horses, gets thrown off the horse and breaks his leg. So now all the neighbors come around and say, well, isn't that awful? And he says, maybe. Next day, conscription officers come around and they're recruiting kids for the army, but they reject him because he has a broken leg. So then all the neighbors gather around and say, well, isn't that great? Maybe. But that's basically what it is. You never know what's going to come. You would thought, oh my God, I'm doomed. I broke my leg, da-da-da. But now just because of that, you may have saved yourself a trip to somewhere where you're going to get killed or potentially get killed. Not to say that's anything wrong with that, because if you live in a country, you should want to fight for it if you have to, right? So, but that's basically what it is. So now it's just like knowing that and having some wisdom that I've acquired. Nothing is really bad to me anymore because I know there's always something that's going to happen from it. If it goes this way, it's going to come back this way. And when it goes this way, it comes back this way. So that's the ebbs and flows, you know what I mean? And that's what life is. And sometimes when the misfortunes happen is when we learn the most and learn to navigate life in a much better way. You know what I mean? So that's just the way it is. We make the best of everything that comes our way.
Very true, very true. So for Crimson Tide, the role was a little bit smaller than what you had like in A Bronx Tale. So how did you prepare for that role, that particular role?
I mean, there's real no preparation really because, I mean, I did a little, I mean, it's not like just going on your phone and all just, accessing. So it wasn't as easy back then. So I would literally go to a library, look at, like read some stuff on submarines and what a radio guy was and what their purpose and what their role was. And in Crimson Tide, the radio transmission had been cut off. So it literally fell all on me, even though it was a smaller role. But I'm basically stationary in my seat. XO radio, you know what I mean? It's not, but that film, I mean, it was some cast, right? Oh my God. Whew. I didn't even realize half of these guys were until later on. Like Viggo Mortensen was in there. Like he played Weps. I mean, James Gandolfini was in there. I mean, I worked with all these guys, and it's like, oh my God, But Tony Scott, who directed Beverly Hills Cop, Top Gun, Days of Thunder, Man on Fire, his brother Ridley, Blade Runner, Alien, Gladiator. These guys are like some of the biggest films in the history of film. Tony directed Crimson Tide. So I remember, because Tony's in LA, so obviously I couldn't get in the room with him, but this was when they had the fax machine. So I remember they faxed me my lines, and my agent, Frank Frateroli, said, Tony Scott. Meanwhile, this guy's directed some of the biggest films, and to me, he's just some guy, Tony. I didn't know. I was just some ungrateful kid. That's what I was. An ungrateful, unappreciative kid. That's what I was, because I should have known who that was. But he called me up, and he's a British guy, and he's sweet as pie, and no pressure. I made me feel comfortable. I was downstairs, my privacy, and I did a couple of lines, XO radio officer, and his reaction was ambiguous. Thank you. You got the part of thank you. That was great, but I think you're a little too young, or I think, it could have went either way. So I didn't really know. But then the next day, my agent called me. How did you do? How did you think? I said, I think it went great, but, I don't know. And he says, well, you got the part. So it did go great. So then I remember going to L.A., meeting Tony Scott, and Tony was the man. He always had the torpedo, Monte Cristo cigar. He had the shorts with the pink hat. It was no joke, Tony. Okay, man, yeah. Lillo. He used to get me nuts. I used to put the headset on, and I remember I used to tighten it so it would really press in my head, and I'd really feel that claustrophobia in that sub, and everything that was going on there spraying me with the Evian spritz to make me look like I'm sweating. And you got Tony Scott, and this submarine was built on a gimbal, so it's like remote control. It moves and it shakes like when we get hit. This guy Al DeSaro, He was the special effects guy on Speed and like some big movies. So I definitely want to give Al DeSaro some credit because he built that. He built that submarine. So now when I go there, I remember I didn't even know what Tony Scott looked like. I remember I walked on the set my first day, and I remember the submarine was like that. For whatever reason, you know what I mean? It had to be this way. And I remember, do you know what they put on the floor? You know what was the floor was covered in? Coca-Cola. It was sticky, so then you could grip. All the floors, yeah, they had Coca-Cola, so then you wouldn't slip, yeah. And I remember, yeah, Tony Scott was like literally this guy with like grand camera equipment. He had forearms like this. This guy's like literally on the floor, like this guy was into it. It was just getting there and seeing what he was up to. Like, wow, this guy's dedicated, which means I got to be dedicated too. That guy was, Tony died, jumped off a bridge when he had inoperable brain cancer, but he also hired me for Enemy of the State with Will Smith. I love that guy, man. What a great guy he was. Working on that film, and I mean, he used to rev me up. Lillo, you're fucking mad, Lillo. Okay, in action, Lillo. And it was like, I was like almost like fumbling the thing. I couldn't even grab it. I was like so worked up. But it worked. It worked. Whatever he did, it worked.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah.
Yes.
So you think he's the one that brought you over to Enemy of the State then? Do you?
Oh, I know for a fact. I got him. I remember I got him a bottle of Cristal at the end because my dad used to chaperone me. Because when I started the film, I was 17, but then my birthday. So he remembered my dad. And I remember we did Enemy of the State. He asked, how's your dad? He was a good man. I remember he said to me, Lillo, to say thank you, he said, Lillo, you're a sweet kid. You were a brilliant Vossler. We will definitely be working together again. And then that wasn't even an audition or anything. It was just a straight offer through my agent. And they said, Lillo, Tony Scott wants you. It's one day. It's this union guy. And I don't care if I was an extra just to work with Tony again. And then we worked together again. And I remember the first time I saw him after all those years, because what they did was, for that character, I remember the wardrobe woman said, Tony wants a polyester look for this character, which I thought fit perfectly for a union guy. He's a little rough around the edges. You know what I mean? So I remember they literally had a whole rack of all different polyesters and different colors. It was the same look, just different mix and matches. So the way we did it was we took I tried to like literally like 20 or 30 different combinations, and we took all pictures, and then they would pin them up on this board. And then when Tony had some time between shots, he came to where we were because he wanted to say, okay, I like that one. That's what I wanted to wear. But I remember when he saw me, he goes, oh no, not you again. He said, oh no. It was so, you know what I mean? It's a great guy, It was great to see him. And then, worked with Will Smith on that. Will Smith, so it was cool being in his presence. That was like surreal because I always watch Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and stuff like that. And then to see to see him just like walk in the room, it's Will Smith, And, but I'm so fortunate that to be able, I'm fortunate to be able to tell you these stories. To say, oh yeah, sometimes I don't even realize,
At this point, did you feel like you become part of Hollywood elite because you have Smith?
No, I never quite reached that level. I think my addiction took control of me before anything like that could have even started to happen. How about that? Yeah. I mean, listen, I've had a very big taste of it. I'm still pursuing it. I'm writing, which I love because I have a lot of ammunition. I have a lot of things to write about. You know what I mean? Just a lot of things that I've seen in all the different walks of life, in my own life, that I can write about, and stuff that your average person doesn't see every day. That's the kind of stuff I want to write about, just to show you and other people like me what we've been through and maybe why we are who and why we act the way we do nowadays. You know what I mean? And who we are now. It's like, you know what I mean? Just to show certain experiences and things. And for those that can relate, great. And for those that can't relate and don't really know, well, this is what this is, I think a lot of people will be like, really interested, to see, and just like I think they'll be blown away, and maybe look at addicts and people as such in a different way after seeing stuff that I want to create, because I'm creating it from my heart and from my soul because I lived it. You know what I mean? So it's coming from a real place, to where I remembered the way I felt. You know what I mean? That moment of when I'm.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So, when did you start using?
I would say, well, first time I smoked pot was on the set of a Bronx Tale, but I really started using, I would say in like 94 is when I touched the cocaine, started dabbling in it, and then did that, and then tried crack here and there. But then I got really paranoid off the coke. I used to experience psychosis. One night I jumped out of a car. I was afraid my friends were like going to hurt me. And then that's when I got hooked on the pain pills, because the doctor gave me the pain pills. And then from that point, then it was a downward spiral, because then it's like like the cocaine is a psychological pull, where the other is a physical. Like when you're on opiates and you take opiates, 3, 4, and 5 days, on that 5th day when you don't have any more, it's not going to be like you did it for 20 years, but you're going to feel something. And when you psychologically know that the reason why you're feeling like that is because you're withdrawing from a drug, and then you know that all you have to do is go get more and you're going to feel better, it's very hard to not want to feel better, especially in the beginning, because you hadn't really done any damage yet. For some reason, well, not for some reason, but because of the lack of experience, like the biggest trick that addiction tells us is that it's just going to go away one day. It doesn't go away. It only gets worse if you don't treat it. And little did I know I was entering the belly of the beast, because I thought, all right, I haven't done any damage. Let me just do a little bit more, and then maybe in a couple of days I'll feel better. But I just felt that I became more dependent and more in control from those pills and from that medication. Then I realized, as time went on, now it's 6 months, and I went from 3 or 4 pills. Now I'm at 7. Now I know logically this is just going to become way worse. And then eventually I was introduced to heroin. I never shot it. And when you don't shoot it, I think it's almost better to I think it's actually, I don't know, the pills were stronger. I feel that because I never shot the heroin. I mean, obviously if you shoot it, the withdrawal is probably going to be way more intense. But I never shot it, and I just feel that sometimes heroin goes bad. Like now it's not really even heroin anymore. People don't want heroin. Nobody wants heroin. People want fentanyl because it's strong stuff. But back then I never really shot it, so I remember coming off the pills was harder. And it was a harder detox than the heroin. So
When did you realize, okay, this thing is gonna affect my movie career?
I knew that early on. But I was just in denial that I was an addict, and I was in denial that I needed to work to make this stop. You know what I mean? I just thought that this is going to go away on its own. But the example and the analogy that I use, it's like a little kid's shirt. Eventually, they're going to outgrow the shirt because they're going to get bigger. You know what I mean? But this addiction is not like a little kid's shirt. You're not going to outgrow this. This is going to outgrow you, and it's going to kill you. So
Yeah. So, at your worst, how much were you using per day?
I was snorting like over 20 bags of heroin. I was smoking near $500 of crack a day. That was in 2005. I would say that's from October to December. Those last few months were terrible, absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
So at some point, did anybody on set kind of see you becoming an addict?
I mean, they really didn't say anything to me, but I think anyone who knows about that and has some experience maybe could have noticed something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what was your lowest point?
You would think it was when I was out using. I think my lowest point was when I overdosed in Rikers Island in 2006, November 12th. Because, this is almost a year that I'm there. Someone's dead because of my addiction, at the hands of my addiction. And I'm still getting high when you would think he's in a place now where he's getting better. And, you know what I mean, scared straight. after what happened and, someone losing their son. But that's not what happened. I just still, this is how powerful it is. I just wanted to keep going to the point where I overdosed in myself.
Okay, listen. How do you get drug in jail? Is it by the COs or the inmate visitors?
The inmates will bring it in, the COs will let it in. You know what I mean? Sometimes, COs don't know, but there are a lot of COs know. It would never be able to go on at the level it does if COs didn't know. Of course it does. But it's not all COs, because you get a lot of COs that buy the book and do their job and would never do that. So,
Right. Yeah. So let's go back a little bit more to the acting. So, Sopranos. How did you land that role?
once again, I had an agent, and I remember I read for the first year, I didn't get the part, but I didn't really care because I didn't know the show was going to be as big as it was. So, but then it did turn out to be like the biggest thing in the world. And then I was fortunate enough to get an audition the second year, and they thought the role fit me, and I got it.
It really did fit you.
So how did you feel about your character getting killed at the end of the season?
I think that's just the way that's the way they intended for it to go. I would have liked to have been on a little bit more, but at that point I didn't want to be greedy. I had a really good role. The death scene was great and definitely memorable. So I know, even though it was 5 episodes, what the mark that I left on this show will be memorable, and will be around for years to come. So just to be listen, if I was on one episode on that show and have worked with the people that were on that show, particularly Gandolfini, Edie Falco, who was tremendous. I had worked with her before on a show that never came out called Firehouse for CBS. So I knew her from back in the day. She was tremendous. Michael Imperioli, who he's from Mount Vernon, I'm from Yonkers. I know his brother. I've known him for many years. And, he was also on the show that I did with Edie Falco. It was called Firehouse. He played a lieutenant, and she played an EMS girl. I was a probationary firefighter. It was Tom Fontana. Tom Fontana created Homicide, Life on the Streets, and the show Oz. So Tom was a big name. He's a good guy. Hey, Tom. I would be happy to have been in just one episode. So.
For a role like this, did they give you a contract for 5 episodes, or how was that work?
Did you?
5 episodes. They knew what was going to happen.
You knew your character was going to die. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I never knew how that worked.
Yeah.
When you had a kind of a short-term existence on a show, if you knew that ahead of time or not.
Short-term, but impactful.
Oh my gosh, so impactful. Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. So I actually was watching this movie earlier today. Goofy movie, The Adventures of Pluto Nash. Yeah, with Eddie Murphy. So, do you have any crazy Eddie Murphy story? I cannot imagine starring in a movie with him.
It was that one day I worked with him. Believe it or not, that was my 25th birthday. That was 2001, August 30th, that I worked with him, and that was right before 9/11. Because I remember we had my birthday party on Sunday, Sunday, September 9th, 2001. I remember the Dolphins played the Tennessee Titans that day. And I remember, and then 2 days later, the whole world changed. But there was really, I didn't really say much to him. I said hello, and that was really about it. He was kind of quiet, not a bad guy, but Burt Young was there. Paulie from Rocky, who I had known. He was a great guy too. He was on Firehouse. He was another one that was on that show. Yeah, he was the fire chief, Frankie Shea. Yeah, so I knew him. But he didn't say much, and I got to work with the comedian Jay Moore. So he was there. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. throughout your career, have you had a role you turned down and later on regret it?
I wouldn't say I turned down roles, but I would say that sometimes I just didn't go to auditions of great things that I could have possibly got. Not possibly gotten, but like I was supposed to be in Basketball Diaries with Mark Wahlberg, I think, and I turned that down because it was either that or Crimson Tide, which I chose Crimson Tide at that time, and nothing against Mark and Leo because look where they are now. You know what I mean? Those guys are, you know, and I tip my hat off to the both of them. Always great times with those guys. Well, I didn't really know Leo as much as Mark. Like if I saw him now, we would say hello to each other, and I met him a few times and had a few conversations. But Wahlberg, we actually worked with, you know, on Renaissance Man, and I just saw his brother Donnie, absolute gentleman, in the North End in Boston a couple weeks ago. Last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a crush on Donnie when I was growing up. So, yeah. Anyways, so did you ever go after a role that you didn't get, but someone else did, and it really kind of changed their life?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Cool, cool. So listen, so by 2003, like the roles stopped coming like they used to. Was that because solely on the drug use?
I definitely think so. I mean, you know, because if there's rumors that someone's on drugs, you know, being on drugs equals, you know, not being dependable. And it's like, is this guy going to show up? Is he going to die? Is he going to die in his hotel room the night before we need to shoot it? Because what happens then is, you know, like when you do these studio movies before, you know, before you actually do the movie, you go see a doctor, and he's got to sign off on a clean bill of health, and only then will they give you, you know, an insurance policy. They take out insurance policies on all the actors because, you know, you got all this money. Say someone dies during shooting, and obviously they're not going to insure somebody who's a risk like that. But, you know, like Robert Downey Jr., that's a big reason why he didn't get a lot of work for all those years, because it was too risky. He's great, and everyone knew he was great, but is he going to show up and be great? That's the thing. And, you know, is it going to affect our bottom line, the budget, and everything? So that's the reason why you don't work, because it's hard to get insurance policy. And, you know, people just don't want to be around that. Think of how many people want to be an actor, and how many people are capable of playing this one role that they're giving to you. So you kind of got to really think about it like that. It's a gift. It's such a gift. And you know, if they feel, you know, they don't want to work with you for some reason or whatever, you're not going to work. That's basically what it comes down to. They feel like this guy's not, we got to worry every day if he's going to show up to work or not. That's a problem, especially since I put my money up for this. And
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So did you ever go to rehab?
oh yeah, I went to rehab quite a few times.
So did your mom ever try to do some kind of intervention? Any family member, friends?
Yeah, we had an intervention in 2005 with my brother's boss this guy, not my brother's boss. My brother worked for the city of Yonkers, and there was this guy that worked for the city. His name was Bill Troy, and you know, he did interventions, and he was on drugs, and you know, and I remember he being at my house one time, and I was literally going in the bathroom to get high, and here he is at the table, my girlfriend and my parents, my brother, everyone was there. Yeah, we tried to do it, but it just wasn't my time yet. I just wasn't ready.
So how was your relationship with your family at the time that you were using? So right around that period.
Well, it was insane. You know, no one trusted me. I was a big liability. You're not going to leave your purse out, you know, because I was a stone cold junkie. You know, rob, steal. That's what happens. You do that stuff without any regard whatsoever. For family, I sold a Christ head that my brother gave me before I went to rehab. I sold it for like a $20 piece of crack. It's disgusting to say, you know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's change gear. So tell us about how did you meet Stephanie?
I met her at the gym. I met her at the gym I used to work out at. She was working there as a summer job. It was 2003, and that's how we met. She had saw a Bronx Tale, and she said it was one of her favorite films with Dirty Dancing. And I remember she said, I loved you. I remember she gave me her phone number, and the rest is history.
Cool.
So how was your relationship?
It was good in the beginning. It was good in the beginning. I was, on drugs the whole time. But I guess as time went on, the addiction became more noticeable. She was going to college, looking to take her MCATs, medical college acceptance test. So I was very distracting to her at that point. So that's how the relationship went south, which I can't disagree with. And that's when I became friends with her father as a reason to still be able to go around the house, and because her and I were done. So then it was like, oh well, I'm here to see your father, and then we became friends. We went out one night, and he brought out a gun unbeknownst to me, and then we went. We weren't going to rob the house. I know we broke the window, but then the shootout ensued, and someone got killed. A police officer off duty, lived next door, and came out to investigate, and that's what happened.
Did he say that he was a police officer?
No, he said don't move. He said don't move. But he said don't move. It's 5:30 in the morning. I gave a little slight thing to see, and then he started shooting. I got hit. The guy I was with got hit. I'm not looking for sympathy, but that's how it happened. And then he got shot. I was already halfway down the sidewalk when he got shot. I heard a loud bang, but I had no clue what it was until everything, until the aftermath, and then aftermath cops showed up. Neighbors were outside, and it was a serious, crazy scene.
You and her dad hang out, go out all the time before that?
Who's that?
Stephanie's dad, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was my girlfriend for a few years. Yeah, absolutely.
Did you know he was prone for violence?
Who, the father? Well, I knew he wasn't a normal dad. I knew he liked to drink, and I knew, he smoked weed with us at the time. You could see he was a little nuts. You could see he had a little in his eyes, he was a little insane. But to that extent, I don't think anybody knew. I don't even think his daughters knew of how he really was. But, it is what it is. Yeah. But, I don't want to make it like, he got me in trouble and I'm like this innocent victim. Because, I was 29 years old that night. I bought him to that house. It's not like he knew that house. I bought him there. So I got to take responsibility also for being there. And, did I know all that was going to happen? Absolutely not. But he was with me in my car and, I took him to that house. So, like I said, I definitely accept some responsibility of how my actions, they made a contribution in what happened, So.
So the trial didn't begin until 2008. So there's a 3-year difference there. Were you incarcerated that whole time, or were you?
Yeah, of course.
So, how much money did you spend in lawyer fee?
Well, I spent about $250,000 in 2008. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what it took, but I'm here. So, yeah, my lawyer's name was Joe Tacopina. Yeah, he's representing. He just got ASAP Rocky off. I don't know if it was a weapons charge or assault or something like that, but that Joe was his lawyer. Joe's he wins. He's very, very capable. Very, very one of the best defense attorneys around, definitely in this country. And I was lucky enough to have him as my attorney represent me in a very serious case, and to have the financial means also to be able to make that happen.
The money you pay, was it from your acting movies, or you had people raise the money to help you pay for
No,
that?
a lot of it I put in myself, borrowed some money from relatives, but for the most part, I was able to put in over 75%. So.
Oh,
That's
good.
great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So So you got found not guilty for the murder charge, but you were found guilty and sentenced for 10 years for the attempted robbery charge, right?
The burglary.
Burglary charge.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes, burglary. So what were you thinking when the judge gave you that sentence?
You know, I think that it was a bit excessive because the sentencing guideline was 3.5 to 15. I was expecting 7 or 8. When I got 10, I think it was a little excessive. But then again, someone did lose their life. But then again, he wasn't allowed to consider the death in the sentencing because I had been acquitted of that, which I definitely think he did. On my first felony, there was case law where a guy got 8 years for the same exact thing on his second felony, and I got 10 on my first. So it was definitely excessive. It was definitely a little bit excessive. But you know what? But that's what was necessary for me to get straight and, sober. It had to be that amount of time, so it worked out well.
Do you think that maybe because you were an actor and people knew your name, that played into the sentence as well?
Probably.
I think, well, yeah, but I think it's more that it was a cop. And I think the two things combined, for me, was a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So you spent 5 years in prison, and that happened at the prime of your career. Did you feel like you waste your prime years away?
No, and during that time, no, I don't think I wasted time at all. I got an associate's degree in business that I paid I was getting all the stuff sent from an outside school. It was an accredited school. So I was going to college. I got sober. Are you kidding me? Those were the best years of my life. I accomplished some of the best things ever while I was away. There was no way in the world was I going to go away for 5 years and just sit around and come home and say, "Oh, what did you do?" Nothing. I read a lot of books about the mafia or books about crime. No, I didn't read. You know what I mean? I actually studied and I did what I have to do. You know what I mean? I recognized why I was there. And I'm not saying anything bad about the mafia or anything like that, but a lot of guys, when you go to jail, that's what they read: crime novels and movies about the books about the mob. There was this one fictitious character. His name was Dutch. He was like this Newark, New Jersey character. He was like this gangster, and there was a lot of books about Dutch. And, like the sequel and the prequel. So these books were very popular. Or when Stephen King came out with that book, remember Doctor Sleep? It was the sequel to The Shining. I remember in 2000, that book was huge while I was behind bars. And those books are cool to read, but it's like, I'm not saying anything about reading books, but I just felt that those books wouldn't make me better as much as going to school would. I enrolled in a school called Ashworth College in Norcross, Georgia. I majored in business management, and I learned a lot. A lot. So I can actually say that I did a lot with that time. A lot. I worked out. I got back to So.
So were there any other celebrities while you were in prison that were in there with you?
Yeah, there was Plaxico Burress and Ja Rule. Ja Rule was there. Hank Morris, he's kind of a celebrity. Hank Morris was the mastermind behind when the state comptroller, Alan Hevesy, stole $30 million from the state pension fund. Hank Morris was there for that. The guy from Tyco, Mark Schwartz, he was there. Guys like that. And I got to say, the guy Hank Morris, you know how much he helped me with school? Do you know how much he helped me with financial management and just questions that I just couldn't break down in 2 seconds? The guy was a genius. The way he helped me was unbelievable.
That's pretty cool.
Exactly.
That is pretty cool. Yeah, I'm so happy that you used that time
Wisely,
to better yourself.
yeah.
I mean, that's so amazing, and I mean, that's really cool. I'm really glad.
It kind of offsets what you're going through, because it's like you're taken out of the world and put here for making bad choices, and instead of sulking and all that, and why me? You know what I mean? Instead of doing that, you got to recognize what it's for, and it's the Department of Corrections. That means that you need to make corrections in your life before you go back out there to live a better quality life and to not hurt anybody. You know what I mean? And not be a menace to society. And I really believe that, educating myself behind bars, I learned, ethics, accounting, financial management. I mean, so much economics, so much that, like just management in general. So much that I learned that I can apply and use today that I'm so grateful to have been able to have that opportunity to do that.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, some people don't ever get that opportunity at
Well,
all.
outside, no,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So since you are a movie star, did they put you in PC or you in Gen Pop?
When I was in Rikers Island, I was considered, my classification was a CMC, Central Monitored Case. So I was with guys like other guys that were there for, in there. One guy was there for, a murder, cop killing. I don't want to mention any names. Got another guy who was there for 6 murders. So I was CMC Max in Rikers Island with guys like that. But then when I went upstate, then they put me in administrative segregation, and then that was kind of like a PC, because the administration is segregating you to protect you for whatever. So that's when I met Hank Morris. It was, Rikers Island classified me as one thing, and then when I went upstate, I was classified as something much, and so it's but also, when I was in Rikers Island, I still had a murder case pending. So once you beat that, your classification goes way down. Because instead of going to a max, now you're going to go to a medium, where you can actually see the outside world. When you're in a max, it's a one big wall. You don't see anything but the wall. So that affects you. Trust me, just being able to see through a barbed wire fence is like a privilege. Because sometimes guys are locked up, say 5-6 years in a max. And then because they've got a good institutional record, they stay out of trouble, they completed school, the GED, now your classification goes down. So now this guy, instead of doing time in the max, now they're going to move him closer to home. It's like a privilege. And now you can actually see the world. You could actually see, it's big. Trust me, it's big. It's big in your head, it affects. But, things now are great. I work for More Life Recovery. My friend Stevie, Matt, Joe, Kenny. It's a drug and alcohol rehabilitation. I'm director of public relations. I love that. I'm going to be there tomorrow morning. I love that. It's my way of going to meetings and my way of staying plugged in. That's just the way I do it. We work together because who knows what could happen. I may encounter a bad moment and maybe I'll think about them and say, hey, if I do this, it may make them want to do it. So we help each other, and it's a beautiful thing. So things are good, thank God.
Do you still seek out movie roles? Are you still doing acting?
Yeah. I still got an agent, stuff like that. But there's a lot of times, like a lot of the roles that I get are more like the Italian American, the typecast, and I'd almost rather not work than work on stuff like that. It just doesn't. It just keeps reaffirming and showing the world that this is basically all I could do. And I don't want to tarnish the great stuff that I did by selling out and just playing these roles for a few dollars. You know what I mean? It's like, I understand we have to, we have to, pay bills and stuff like that. But I love acting not because of the fame or because of anything. I actually love the rush. Just the way I used to do drugs. It's for a rush. And I get that rush when I'm acting, especially when it's a role that's challenging to me, where maybe I'm not a New Yorker and I have to pronounce every word in its entirety. So stuff like that's like challenging to me. So this is like what I really love. So yeah, I'm definitely seeking out. I have a great agent, Andrea Courtney, with established artists. And I'm writing more. I have something in the pipeline that's, we're in the process of getting it. Process of putting it together right now. So
That's good.
Yeah, you have to let us know when that comes out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we follow.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely, I will.
Yeah.
So, okay, now December 31st, 2013, you become a free man. How did it feel to be outside again, to be part of the world again?
Well, at first it was a little hard because it's not like I came home as a war hero or some kind of hero. I was hated by a lot of people, and a lot of people thought I shouldn't be out. So, I'm dealing with that. So it's almost like a bittersweet feeling. I have my family and, people like my little nephew was, born, he was a little baby at the time. So I got to watch him grow up and experience that, which was beautiful. But I didn't see when he was born. I was inside, but at least I got to see him when he was fairly young. But, there were the good things and the bad things, but I was always grateful to once again have my freedom. And I vowed from the beginning, and, because let's face it, things for me could have turned out a lot worse. I could have went away forever. I got shot 3 times, could have easily died. A lot worse could have happened, and it didn't happen. And I recognize that's for a really good reason, not a bad one. So I just promise God that I'm going to give my all and make the best decisions possible, and definitely stay off drugs and dedicate my life and a big portion of it, to helping other addicts, because I look at how valuable someone like me would have been to my parents, who are both Italian immigrants. They don't know. They look at me like I'm a demon child. But if they would have had someone such as myself would explain to them, well, listen, it's not that he's a bad person. He's this, and this right now, and the way we need to help him is this way and this way. And my parents would have loved that. It maybe would have stressed them out a lot less. And that's what I look at now. So many parents are just so helpless. They love their kids more than anything and want to do everything for them, but they can only do so much. It's the kid that's got to want to do what the parents are saying and what is necessary for them to get better. So I've realized that how valuable someone such as myself can be in aiding in someone else's recovery, and just to their families. Once again, things could have been a lot worse for me, and they weren't. And I owe God a lot, and just the world. You know what I mean? I owe a lot, and I feel that, this is what my real purpose in life is to help others who are struggling with addiction. And the Bronx Tale was such a prominent and great film that will literally never go away. And as time goes on and the generations pass, it seems like every generation loves and receives the film the same way. It transcends time. So someone who just saw it at 19, who's struggling with addiction, like, wow, I love this film. It's like, oh my God, you're that guy. And then it's like, yeah, and I know you're struggling right now, and I went through this as well. And just know that, you can get better from this, but it's got to be you that has to make that decision and that conscious effort from now until the end. This is every day. You got to make the conscious effort to not want to get high. Believe me, it gets easier when you rewire your brain and you start seeing positive things and what they yield, and then your brain's like, okay, this is pretty cool too. And then you realize that you can cope. You have different coping mechanisms. Everything becomes easier. But, you got to get to that stage before you realize that. And, it's very hard to take that first, because people are afraid. When they're doing drugs 15, 20 years, that's all they know. And they associate everything they do with getting high. It's very hard. It's like you took their kryptonite away from them, and they can't do anything. Or like Samson, remember his hair? It's like, so that's basically what it is. So I just want to be able to help others, and and at the same time help myself. But it's more important to help others. But I'm saying, not in a selfish way, but it does help me a lot. You got to practice what you preach. If you're preaching that this is what it is, you got to live like this, and it just helps you stay, on a straight line, because you're doing it for you, you're doing it for them, you're doing it for their parents, you're doing it for a lot. A lot is riding on your sobriety right now, so it's just more of a reason to want to stay that way. So,
Man, Cecil, you're doing amazing, man. You changed your life around. It's at 180. Yeah. Kudos to you, man.
Yeah, and I'm a social worker, and he's in the medical field and nursing, and we just, we love your story. Your story is just amazing to us. I mean, we loved you, in your early career watching you, but then, going through all that you went through. We're both the same age as you.
Yeah.
So, we
I'm older than him. He's a baby. Come on, don't do that to me.
we just appreciate you so much. So, and love what you're doing now. This is great. It's so
Don't change,
needed.
man. Keep it up. Don't change. Be who you are. Keep helping these people, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here,
I
man.
really appreciate you guys having me on the show.
yeah.
Let's do it again sometime.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. We will.